Podcast City Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 146 of the Nest Podcast. I'm Brandon, joined as always by my co-host, Zach. Zach, what's going on, my man?
Hey, what's up?
Not too much, bro. We're here for another live episode of the Nest Podcast here on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. We're out there trying to go out and reach as many people as possible. So if you'll help us out by sharing the link, help us reach your friends and family too, because I'm sure they're interested in what we've got to say tonight. The popular expression goes, out with the old and in with the new. And MLB is at a pretty interesting situation right now where we have members of the old guard that are desperately trying to protect the old ways of things in baseball. And then we've got these new kids that are coming along, bat flipping, chain wearing, swag having. And we're going to talk about all that and all that excitement. But tonight we have a special guest that's going to be joining us. Zach reached out and said, hey, we need to have the dude that was from Locked On Cardinals come on to the show this week because a lot has happened with the St. Louis Cardinals, and I want to talk about it. So without further ado, please welcome to the show Mr. Lucas Smith from the Locked On Cardinals podcast. Lucas, what's going on, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I had a good time last time, and hopefully we can have some more fun baseball talk tonight. I'm doing good.
Absolutely. Thanks again for coming on. You know, we had you on back when we did our spring training preview of the National League Central, and we did have a good time. We had you and a Cubs podcaster on here for that episode. Tonight it's just you because the Cardinals seem to be stealing the spotlight everywhere. They were on Sunday Night Baseball last night. They're on Monday Night Baseball tonight. They're kind of popping up all over my TV and all over my timeline. So we have you here. Zach, what did you want to talk about?
Well, first off, I want to get into the series that just wrapped up over the weekend. Obviously, like Brandon alluded to, we got some national coverage this weekend, which was nice. We got to be on Fox on Saturday and obviously ESPN Sunday, ESPN again tonight. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, the Cubs series is special. And this one was pretty special because this was the first time in over a year that the Cubs played at Busch Stadium, which was pretty interesting. Obviously, the COVID season had its woes and they never were able to make it down here. So yeah, it was a good first series. Obviously didn't do so great, but I think as a whole, the team is not in a bad place. And I want to first pick your brain about Saturday's game. And there was at the end of the game, it didn't really matter too much, but there was just a call that was not great. I can't remember who was at bat. Was it Waino?
Saturday's game or Sunday's game?
Saturday's game.
I don't remember who was at bat for the call that for that one. No.
Nonetheless, they hit a ball down the line and it's fair at the moment. It's rolling pretty slow and it eventually rolls foul. And Nolan Arenado's right up on it and he scoops it up after he presumably sees it roll past the line. And Yachty is also there with him. And obviously one of the umpires is there. And the umpire decides to call it fair. And Yachty and Arenado just lose their minds on that. Yeah. And I don't blame them. I mean, most of the camera angles weren't definitive. But I have to imagine a platinum glove third baseman knows when a ball is fair or foul.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you got a lot of gold right there disagreeing with the home plate umpire and Nolan and Yachty. And Phil Kelsey was a home plate umpire. And like you said, all is well that ends well. Next batter flew out. So, I mean, it wasn't a huge deal, but that's just a difficult one because, as a fielder, you're taught to get that ball as soon as it goes foul because it might go back fair. So Nolan probably did it as soon as he thought it went foul. And like you mentioned, camera angles weren't real definitive. There are a couple shots that were kind of from first base, if you will, that looked like it was foul right before Nolan picked it up. But then Alex Reyes' leg gets in the way, so we don't know. And again, what's kind of weird is that there's always some little rule, right, that kind of gets you, that makes you scratch your head. Theoretically speaking, if you look at it straight down, if any part of the ball is over the chalk line, so not even touching the chalk, but over the line, it's a fair ball. And maybe that's what home plate umpire felt because he saw. We don't know. We'll never know. We're probably never going to know if that was a correct call or not. Definitely was questionable, especially like we mentioned, when Nolan and Yachty erupt and get really pissed off right away. I was yelling at my TV whenever that happened as well. And as an umpire myself, I try and give them the benefit of the doubt, but that was definitely, a questionable call, not the only questionable call made over the weekend.
From my point of view, not having a dog in this fight, really, like you guys both do, I can see why the umpire called it a fair ball. Because like you alluded to, Lucas, as it was rolling down the base path, Arenado grabbed it, but the ball is a sphere. And yes, I'll concede that the part of the ball that was touching the ground was in foul territory, but the part of the ball that was over it, the shadow of the ball, if you will, I think it was still touching the line. I don't think it had fully drifted. And from the videos that I saw, it looked like the ball was actually starting to roll back into fair territory, like Zach alluded to. So I think whenever Arenado grabbed it, it was technically a fair ball.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely grabbed it as soon as he could because he probably saw what you saw, and that's, it might go back fair. And even though he's Nolan Arenado, he had no shot at throwing that base runner out.
No, he was safe by a mile.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was the right baseball play to let it go foul. And again, it's one of those things that it's a snap call by the umpire. I see where he was going with it. I actually didn't have as much of a problem with that call as most people did, but I do agree it was a questionable call. So,
yeah, I'll concede that maybe the home plate umpire had a bird's eye view and that it was still on the chalk line or whatever it might be. Another big gripe that I had is that that wasn't reviewable. I mean, that was a game-ending play. That would have been the game-ending play. How is that not important enough to gain the ability to be reviewable? And whatever they want to say about the speed of the game or whatever they want to give out there is kind of ridiculous because, in my opinion, if it's a win or lose type call and it's questionable, it should automatically be reviewable. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird that the MLB is still in that old mindset of whatever the umpire says goes when all these other sports have the instant ability to go to replays.
Yeah, I thought it was bizarre because, again, I probably should look this up, but I thought anything before the bag was reviewable fair foul. Or there's some rule there of if it's before the bag or past the bag, then it's fair foul. And, probably should look that up before I speak about it. But anyways, I still think it should be reviewable. Because is that a judgment call? Sure, but it's fair foul. There is a way to see if a ball is on the line or not. But again, to kind of go back and forth, the camera angles that we saw on TV, none of them really showed anything definitive. So by the rule of the law of replay, if it's not conclusive video evidence, then the call probably would have stood anyways. Sure. But I still would have liked to see them take an extra look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe not the players, by them, I mean the umpires in New York. And, and like I said, I saw a replay today in the 7th inning of a Blue Jays Rays game that took 2 minutes and a play that had nothing to do with the outcome of that game. And that was reviewable for 2 minutes, but this play wasn't, like you mentioned, because that put the time gun on base, put the go-ahead run at the plate in the 9th inning. That play should be reviewable. It's just one of those things that baseball, I don't mind the replays, having a replay system, but they got to work some kinks out with it still, as in its fourth or fifth year in existence.
Right.
Per the MLB.com rules website, foul ball calls are involving a decision regarding whether a batted ball was foul are reviewable only on balls that are first land at or beyond first or third base umpire.
There it is. Okay.
So because it wasn't past the third base umpire in this instance, non-reviewable. I think that is one of the things, to your point, Zach, that at the end of the season, when they go into the collective bargaining agreement and they're discussing the rules for the upcoming seasons, they really need to take a look at some of these reviewable plays and figure out which ones they want to keep and which ones they want to get rid of or add to the list of reviewable plays. Because I'm looking at it now and there are only about 10 things that are reviewable. I definitely think a called third strike should be a reviewable play, because how many times do we see a called third strike that's 3 inches off the plate?
Right. Yeah. And that ties in right to our next issue with this series is that I can't remember his name, but the home plate umpire for Sunday Night Baseball's game,
Eric Backus,
was not doing great. And David Ross let him know and thus got tossed pretty early. It was like the 3rd or 4th inning.
Yeah, 4th inning.
And he never got any better. And there was nothing ever done about it, obviously. And I think the definitive thing that really made a dent in that game was when Nolan Arenado was up with 2 people on base or something like that.
Bases loaded, I think.
And he had bases loaded.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And he had to protect a plate that was bigger than a normal strike zone, and you could tell because he had to foul off things that would have been a ball. And I could immediately tell that it was affecting his ability to hit the ball. And it sucks. It sucks to see that someone behind the plate with all the power is affecting the outcome of the game.
Here's what I'll say. I agree. I mean, at the major league level, balls that are 3 to 4 inches off the plate should not be strikes. Like, I think we can all agree on that. What I will say is that for the most part, I thought he was consistent. He was given 1 inch, 2 inches off every single time. So I'm gonna play umpire here for just a moment. That he was for the most part consistent on that 2 inches outside the strike zone.
Yeah.
I also think that the Busch camera angle, because it's off just a bit, maybe those looked even more outside than they were. So maybe he was even giving more off. Who knows? But again, at the major league level, even if you are consistent, like that's part of it, but you still have to be consistent within the strike zone, not a strike zone, the strike zone. Like I'm a high school umpire. That's a high school strike. 2 to 3 inches off the corner of the plate is a high school strike, right? And I thought that, for David Ross to get tossed in the 4th inning, was the umpire having a rough night in terms of, giving the extra inches? Yeah, but that was real early for Ross to get tossed there. And the pitch that he was arguing wasn't even the worst call of the night on the pitch to Bryant. So he was mostly consistent, but yeah, you can't be calling pitches 3 to 4 inches off the plate at the major league level. You just can't.
Right.
Yeah, and that seems to be a thing that happens in every game that you watch, no matter who the behind the plate official is. We've got our usual candidates that we all like to throw under the bus, your Angel Hernandez's and people like that. But everybody makes those mistakes and everybody has their own strike zone. Some are more liberal than others. I think we had a comment last week that was from one of our regular listeners that said he thinks that all of the major league umpires have a stock in the robo ump, and they're just blowing calls so that they can implement that so that they can all get paid. And there might be something to that theory. I don't know. It might just be, playful banter or whatever, but there is something going on because they are blowing a lot of calls, especially this season.
Yeah, I think, one thing too that like what bothers me is that they have the K zone up there on the batters, and like that does literally nothing but make the umpires look bad. Makes them look worse. Like, are they doing the best job? Who knows? Like, but that K zone isn't always. It's gotten better over the years, but it's not always the exact strike zone, and it just makes them look even worse than they are. Because they're already bad. Then you compound that with a pitch that's not even close to the K zone that gets called a strike, and it's just like I really don't understand that the K zone to be on the batter. I'm not a big fan of it.
Well, and to your point, you were talking about how the camera angles aren't exactly on, but the K zone is on there like a 2D image on your screen. So it does differ a little bit. So there is a little give and take. But all that being said, the Cardinals didn't fare too well this weekend against the Cubs, but they're still holding a 2-game lead in the NL Central going into this series against the White Sox. How do you guys feel about the Cardinals going into this series, and how do you feel about the division outlook going forward?
I'll give credit to Chicago, the Cubs, that is. I thought, going into this season, I really thought they were a 4th place team, and they've really overperformed in my estimation, but they've played well. I'm not going to try and sit here and make excuses, but at the same time, kind of reel it in. The Cardinals were out of their two starting outfielders for the last games of this series. They had Michaelis in game 2 that hadn't pitched since 2019. So despite them losing 2 out of 3, I still feel pretty good about the Cardinals' chances at this division. I still think they're the favorites. And I think that once they, as we get closer to the trade deadline, we'll get closer to see, what the Cardinals are in the market for. I said on my podcast today that I think they need a starter. I think they need 2 bullpen arms and they need a bench bat. Even with the depleted bench as it is with injuries, they still need a bench bat, even when they're not full strength. So I still feel pretty good. I really love this starting pitching staff. It's really hard to hate on the bullpen. People named Cabrera, Reyes, and Gallegos. They've been exceptional. So I feel really good still. I would like them to start getting a little bit more consistent offense, but they lost 2 out of 3, and that's tough to swallow. But I still feel pretty good about the Cardinals' chances.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would love to know what this series would have been if we would have had our left fielder, our right fielder, and our shortstop in play, and what would have happened if Miles Michaelis would have been able to continue on. And speaking of Miles Michaelis, I hope the best for him, but
for sure,
kind of almost pretty much ready to accept the fact that he might be getting Tommy John here pretty soon.
Yeah, I think Jeff Jones tweeted out today that he's getting a second opinion on Wednesday. So we'll see what that news. And that's as good as this front office has been over the last handful of years. That's one of their worst contracts that they've given out to date. But anyways, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Yeah, you're completely right. But yeah, we move on. It's not the end of the world. But like you, I'm still very hopeful for this team. I think. The NL Central is kind of interesting. Like you said, I expected the Cubs to be a pretty much dumpster fire, but they're pretty good. And the Brewers have slipped from second place, which is very interesting. So yeah, it's still all up in the air. I'm excited for the next series, and I think we're in a relatively good spot. We could be better, but injuries are going to happen, and you just got to move on.
Yeah, that's a good outlook. And I think, like you guys, I think the Cardinals will be just fine this season. I think we all picked the Cardinals to win the division whenever we had you on last time. So I haven't changed my opinion yet. And I'm looking forward to September when I get to go and see the Cardinals play in Milwaukee against the Brewers. That'll be a good series, a good time, especially there at the end of September. Both teams may be making that playoff push.
Absolutely. That'll be a lot of fun.
So one thing that I do kind of hope that I get to see whenever I'm there is I hope I get to see a bench clearing brawl, because that's one of the greatest things in all of baseball. And we've seen a lot of tempers flared this year and a lot of potential fights because of unwritten rules and people breaking those unwritten rules. What do you guys think of all of the controversy that's come about that just this season alone? Lucas, you can go ahead and answer first. What do you think about things like swinging on a 3-0 count, bunting with a no-hitter going on, stuff like that?
I've never been a fan of bunting on the no-hitter. The 3-0 swing, I really do think it's a situation basis. But when you asked about the general question, I really think we're at a tipping point, if you will, or a shifting point in the culture of baseball, because you've got a lot of guys that are still old school, especially managers. I would probably consider Mike Schilt an old school manager. You have a lot of managers that are still trying to be these old school guys because a lot of them are older guys. But then that doesn't really correlate with today's flair, today's excitement, today's hoopla, whatever word you want to use. We're really kind of at a shift right now, and these two things are butting heads. You've got old school versus new school, and you've got tempers flaring up because of it, because some guys like it, some guys don't. Nobody likes 98-mile-an-hour fastballs coming out their heads. So when you have that coming, those brawls are going to happen. So I think that, I'm sure we'll get into specific situations when you reference the 3-0 swing. I'm not a huge fan of it. I know, obviously, I'm not going to hate on a player when he does swing 3-0, but it just is what it is. If I'll go ahead and bring up the example that I think you're referencing when your mean Mercedes swung 3-0 a couple days ago, a week ago at this point, hit a home run. If you're going to put in a position player to pitch, you're waving the white flag. You've got nothing to complain about. Zero. You've got to take that hit. You're already taking the hit down 15-4. If you're going to, you can't get mad at Mercedes for swinging. As a Twins, I don't think you can, just because you're already waving the white flag. That's my thoughts on it, on that particular situation. But, I'm probably more old school than new school, but I'm on board with the new school stuff. Unwritten rules, if they're not written, there's nothing to follow.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that the Twins, when they actually came back the next night and threw behind Mercedes, that was Bush League. And then the fact that, I guess, you guys probably have a soft spot for him. La Russa coming out and saying that he feels that the Twins handled it appropriately, that he shouldn't have swung, and that he swung through a stop sign and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I don't think Mercedes did anything wrong. Like you said, they had a position player out there on the bump throwing 50-mile-per-hour batting practice. So if he's going to throw batting practice, what do you do in batting practice? You swing and hit the long ball.
Yeah.
That's what you do. So if you're going to serve it up like that on a tee, he's going to hit it, 380 feet over the wall. That's what they do. These are professional hitters. And whenever this guy hits arbitration or is going up for his free agency contract, they're not going to look and be like, oh, that was a stellar walk you took against that position player. No, they're going to say, hey, you hit whatever amount of home runs this year. That was a pretty big season. He's playing for his own contract. He's playing for his own iron in his pocket. And that's what these guys are out there doing. I think it's absolutely egregious that Tony La Russa sided with the other team against his own player. That is the biggest mind boggle of it all, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about old school and all this stuff. Old school is standing up for your team. Old school is standing up for your guy. And if you're going to go out there and say, yeah, it's fine for you to throw at my guys, that's a problem. I think there's also something to the fact that after that incident, the White Sox went on to get swept by the New York Yankees. Tony La Russa has lost that clubhouse.
Yeah. And we talked about that early on, when he basically got that job. Is this going to work? I mean, there's a bunch of hot, young, eccentric, crazy players on that team, and you've got old school as old school gets.
Yeah.
La Russa. What's going to happen here? And I thought maybe it would work if he could just sit back and let the boys play and do his thing as manager, but clearly he can't do that. And I think we all knew that Tony La Russa would have an issue with this, but for him to go out on record and in the media say that he had no problem with that is ridiculous. If he truly feels that way, that's fine. That's his opinion. He's got his own merits that he can live with or whatever. But I think if you do have a problem with that as a manager, you handle that in-house. You go up to that batter and say, hey, I gave you the take sign. You better take. I'm in charge here. I don't care if it's 3-0 or whatever. Go about it that way. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's very smart to go out on public record against your own guys.
Yeah, you don't handle it when the red light is on.
No. Absolutely.
Yeah, too, when you're talking about like sticking up for your guy, and not only is this just a guy on a team, this is a guy in your Mercedes that has replaced Eloy Jimenez for the most part. I mean, Eloy Jimenez is done for the year. Luis Robert is done for the year, to my knowledge, or at least for 4 or 5 months. And this guy is providing you offense. So really, you're outing one of your better players as Tony La Russa. And it's mind-boggling because the 3-0 swing, that's a different debate. A lot of people have their own opinions. I think one thing that we can all agree with is that La Russa handled that situation horribly, just horribly. And, like I said, he's won a lot of baseball games. He was a great manager in his heyday. His heyday was 10, 15 years ago. I'm sorry. It just was. I'm not trying to disrespect him. One of the best managers of all time, one of the best coaches in all of sports of all times. All that is still true. That doesn't change the fact that he shouldn't be in today's baseball. He just shouldn't, in my opinion. I was not a huge fan of that hire for a multitude of reasons. And I agree with you, Brandon. He has no control of that clubhouse. No, I don't think anybody has any respect for him. I really don't.
And I think that's going to be a huge problem. Going into that skid that they've been on recently, they were the first place team in the American League Central. I haven't checked the standings today, but I'm pretty sure after that sweep, they've dropped. And I have a feeling that trend is going to continue, and we're not going to see the White Sox really be able to get going again because of the fact that they don't respect Tony La Russa right now. They don't think that he's their guy. And if you lose the clubhouse, I mean, I'm a Red Sox fan. I remember the chicken and beer in the clubhouse and all that stuff whenever Bobby Valentine was the manager. Mm-hmm. He lost the clubhouse. He had no control, and that team absolutely sucked. Same thing is going to happen in Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if they go down to last place, and they're a game and a half ahead of Cleveland entering play today. Because I think this White Sox team is still really talented, and at the end of the day, the manager is not going to be a difference in a team winning 100 versus 90 games. Like, the manager's role at this level, because of how talented these guys are, is controlling the clubhouse, is creating that culture. So are they going to probably be worse? Would they be better with a different manager? Sure, absolutely. But at the end of the day, these guys are, like you mentioned, professional hitters, or, mentioned a little bit ago. I still think that they're going to be a dangerous team, but they could be more dangerous with the manager that they believe in.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a bad move for the club as a whole. I think this team had the potential to make a World Series run this year. And for whatever reason, the GM or whoever made that decision wanted to go old school. And I don't think it was the right move. I think the right move would have been a guy who knows how to manage a team and knows how to play the bullpen and where to put people and how to just maintain the positions out on the field. I don't think you need a guy who, like you said, was 10, 15 years ago, one of the best to ever do it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that's necessary. These guys are super talented, and all they needed was somebody to make the decisions that a manager does while on the field. They don't need some old school, old guy who's going to go out there and try to make them play the game like he thinks it should be played.
And here's the thing, just another quick things on Tony La Russa, why this hire makes little to no sense is St. Louis media is not Chicago media. I don't think he could have handled Chicago media back when he was in his heyday, let alone now. I mean, they're eating him alive, first of all. But also, my thing with La Russa is just like, who else gets away with a comment like that? What other manager in today's baseball game keeps his job after outing his player not once but twice? Yeah. Not only that player, but he also outed tonight's starter, Lance Lynn, by saying, he's got a locker, I've got an office. I think I'm right. I mean, what other manager keeps his job?
If that were Aaron Boone in New York, he would be crucified right now.
Yeah, he would have lost his job. I really believe that. I believe that.
So, I like you alluded to, the Cardinals are playing the White Sox for the next 3 games. So I think you guys are actually getting them at the right time. You can kind of pick off where the Yankees left off and hopefully get a couple wins for you guys. But I want to touch on some more of these unwritten rules. And according to the super credible website, Wikipedia, these are the most common unwritten rules of professional baseball. We mentioned not bunting during a no-hitter, and we'll get to some no-hitters in just a moment. Lucas, you said you're not a fan of that, right?
Yes.
Zach, how do you feel about bunting during a no-hitter?
I think it's a cheap move. I think if a guy's pitching well past the 7th inning and it looks like he might have the chance to get a no-hitter, you should grant him that respect of, I will swing or not, and let him decide whether or not if he's good enough to pitch to you, and if you're good enough to either get a hit or strike out or whatever it might be. I think that the bunting to break up a no-hitter is dumb and a bad move.
I agree. I don't mean to be too wishy-washy on my new school or old school. I just think there's certain things that, if you weren't going to bunt for a base hit when he's given up 4 hits, why do it with 0? You know what I'm saying? If you're not a speed demon, especially.
I get your point about bunting for a base hit, but I would pose the question, what if you are trying to advance a runner? Because during a no-hitter, he could have walked a guy. So
I got no problem with that.
You could have a runner on first. If they're going to shift on you like they do a million times in today's game, why wouldn't you want to bunt that runner over to second, get him in the scoring position? Because if you're getting no hit, then obviously you're also being shut out, and you're trying to score some runs. That's what the game is.
I'm fine with that.
That's a good point. Yep.
If he walks a guy and you've got maybe the 8th or 9th hole coming up and he can potentially move the runner up, I'm fine with that. But if it's no outs and the 8th inning and your number 2 guy is up or whatever it might be, a capable hitter, and he bunts just to get on base, that's ridiculous.
Okay. One of the unwritten rules that we're seeing all over baseball getting shattered is do not admire your home runs. This is something that a lot of the guys, back in the day, if you admired a home run, you would have pitchers like Dennis Eckersley barking at you from the mound, hey, run, dummy. You would have Nolan Ryan ready to throw a 96-mile-per-hour fastball at you the next time you stood in. Yep. But nowadays, it seems like these guys are hitting a home run a mile away, and they're sitting there watching it before they even start their trot. Fernando Tatis Jr. is probably the worst culprit of this because he's very bad about hitting a ball and just walking as he's going down the first baseline. That's the way that these guys are playing now. They'll throw the little bat flip and stuff like that. How do you guys feel about admiring those homers?
I got no problem with it. I think that, the only way I would have a problem with it is that if you admire it and then it hits the wall and you're stuck on first base, then it's like, well, what do you do? Like that's kind of the big thing of the old school guys. Well, it could not go. I got no problem with the bat flips, with the watching it, whatever. And as a pitcher in high school, I tend to be more of a pitcher mindset when it comes to baseball type things. If you hit a ball 450 feet, admire it. That is not an easy thing to do, especially in today's baseball game. Bat flip, strut, whatever. The same thing due to pitchers. Pitchers get a big strikeout, celebrate it. I'm not, Trevor Bauer, that's a different podcast discussion, but, he's exuberant, he's loud, he does what he does. He's got the sword thing with the pitching ninja. Great. It goes both ways. I have no problem with the bat flip.
Yeah, I agree. It makes the sport more exciting, and that's really what we need at the moment. And I think as long as the pitcher has the ability to celebrate when he does his job correctly, then I think it's fair game. If you strike a guy out and you get your little strut on like Trevor Bauer does, then that's fine. On the other hand, if somebody gets a bomb and they want to bat flip or do whatever they want to do, that's fine. I have no problems with that. I think that's one of the things that I think is going to just become accepted, because basically everyone who's anybody is doing that now. There's really nobody that's doing the traditional type thing. And if they are, they're not the Tatis of the world. So I think that's one of those things that people are just going to give up on, because it's so in our faces that we're just going to get used to it. And I don't have any problem with it at all.
To Trevor Bauer's point, he actually supported Mercedes on that swinging on 3-0. He's like, look, if I give up a 3-0 home run, don't consider it a crime. Admire it. Look at it. You hit a home run in a Major League Baseball game. I'm paraphrasing, but he's for it. He's for guys showing this. And 2018 MLB launched this whole campaign, Let the Kids Play, where they encouraged guys to go out there and show emotion and play like the way that they are seeing now. And they've seen ratings boosts all over the place because of this new energy that baseball players are playing with. So they're encouraging these guys to go out and promote themselves and make a name for themselves, unless your name is Trevor Bauer, and then you'll get fined for it. But that's another story altogether. And you mentioned something, Lucas, about, what if they hit this home run and then what they think is a home run, and then it hits the wall and they end up with a long single. To that point, national superstar Juan Soto had a pretty egregious base running mistake in their game last night as well. He hit a pop-up right behind home plate, and the wind was blowing. It was really crazy or whatever, and he just kind of stood there and watched it, thinking that the catcher was going to make the play and that he would be, a pop fly out or whatever it was. Well, the ball ended up landing in fair territory. When all this happened, the runner that was on third base ran and scored, and Soto should have been safe at first base if he would have just ran down there, because it was up there for an hour and the catcher was trying to locate it, ended up not catching it, landed in fair territory. He picked it up, threw it to first base. Soto was out. Cost them a run, cost him an RBI. So pretty big deal. Now the Nats manager, Dave Martinez, actually came out and made Juan Soto apologize to his team. I think that you're trying to handle it in your own clubhouse and all that stuff. You didn't blast them on TV. You didn't blast them in the media, but at the same time, you're going to make the star player on your team. I know Max Scherzer's there, and I know they've got some other talent there, but you're going to make the young star of your team humble himself in front of, all of his peers and all that stuff. I think that's going to set a precedent going forward that Juan Soto's not going to be there whenever it comes time to re-up for a contract. He's going to say, screw this. I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere else where they treat me like the star that I am. Yeah, it's interesting, like the different ways that you can handle it and how people can still get rubbed the wrong way by it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. That is an interesting one. I find it odd that a manager would make a player do anything. I guess he's the big boss, but it's just strange that these are adults and they've signed contracts and they're there to do their job, and it's still strange that they're being forced to apologize or whatever. I don't think a forced apology has any weight to it anyway.
No, and they
I
didn't
agree.
even lose the game. They ended up still winning the game. So it wasn't even like, oh, you blew this huge game for us or whatever. They still won the game. So I don't know. It was just kind of weird. I saw that when I was
That's bizarre.
prepping for this episode, and I was like, that's kind of a weird story right there with Soto.
Mhm.
Let's see. We've got some other unwritten rules, like you don't want to steal a base if your team's up by a lot. That can piss off some guys or whatever. I was actually at a game in Tampa when the Rays were crushing the Red Sox. They were up like, I don't know, 11-2 or something like that in the 8th inning. And a player stole third base. And I was sitting at the third base dugout, and instantly the guy popped up, and I could hear the players in the dugout. They were chirping him, and he stood up and he started pointing his finger, flipping off guys and all this stuff. And all of a sudden there was a bench clearing brawl right in front of me. And it was awesome. I ended up on ESPN replays and all this stuff because I was going crazy standing behind the dugout. My girlfriend at the time, she was in the bathroom, so she missed it all. So sucks
Tough.
for her. But she came back, and I was like, "You missed it!" The whole thing happened while she was gone. But that was the fight when Johnny Gomes came running from left field, and he threw a haymaker punch at somebody on the Rays. It was a big deal, big brawl. But stealing a base whenever you're up by a lot, that tends to rub people the wrong way. It's like, oh, you're trying to really cream us now. So I can see why that would piss people off. But at the same time, if you're losing by a lot, are you really going to go out there and try to work a pitcher's count, or are you going to go out there and just swing on the first strike? These guys are still professionals. They're still padding their stats. So that stolen base, if you're going to give it to him, if you're going to play off the third base line and let him steal it, why not?
Yeah, I have a little bit more of a problem with stealing the base than I do swinging at a 3-0 swing, swinging at a 3-0 pitch, because I just feel like stealing a base is something extra that doesn't even happen that often anywhere. Whereas swinging 3-0 happens in any situation.
Sure.
I just feel like stealing a base, doing something extra. I don't know. It's hard to put into words, really, and I'm butchering it, but I just have more of a problem with stealing a base than I do with any of the other unwritten rules, because it feels like it's a very extra, very loud extra thing that you are doing seemingly just to rub it in and to pad the stats. So I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm not saying I would bean some guy for stealing a base when they're up by 10. Like I just wouldn't sit with me very well, and kind of take it there.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I'm middle of the road. It seems kind of like a waste. But like Brandon said, he's padding his stats, and if you're going to give it to him, why not take it? All you have to do, not that it's that easy, but all you have to do to prevent a runner from stealing is to keep him honest. And you're out there to do your job as a pitcher and as a defense. So do it, and maybe you wouldn't be down by so many points to get pissed off at this. So
yeah,
I'm kind of whatever on that.
Now, I'm sending you guys a link right now into our chat here, and it has a picture of Trevor Story and Fernando Tatis Jr. rocking their newest swag. It seems like some of these teams are starting to come out with home run chains, and they're these big, overly obnoxious chains that maybe like a rapper or somebody like that, maybe a professional wrestler even would wear. Quentin Rampage Jackson used to wear huge chains in MMA, and it kind of looks like that, but it's got medallions of their team's logos on it as well. And these guys are out there rocking these new home run chains in their post-game interviews. They're out there, we've mentioned it before, doing the bat flips whenever they hit these big bombs and stuff. Is the swagginess of baseball, is that attracting people, do you think?
Well, you see it in football with the turnover chains, or so that's where I equate it to, not necessarily wrestling, but for football, and people seems to love it in football, so I have no problem with this one either. I think it's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah. I'd like it too. I hope every team doesn't start doing it, because I think then it would be overkill.
Get creative, do something different. Maybe one team has a belt, one team's got a hat, one team's got, I think it'd be fun.
I was going to say in football leagues and teams and stuff like that, you'll have the guy that gets the most recent interception is the interception champion, and he'll wear this special custom belt that is like, oh, I'm the champ right now until somebody else gets a pick. Yeah, stuff like that is cool. It encourages these guys to go out there and do something. Hey, if you want the chain, go out there and hit the game-winning bomb.
Yeah, I completely agree. It gives people and the sport a personality, which it desperately needs. I think MLB is severely lacking in that department, where we've got a crap ton of stars scattered throughout the entire league, and we know a few, but I think they could definitely capitalize on just the sheer amount of good players that the MLB has, especially compared to some other leagues, especially like the NBA, where basically all of the good players are on 2 or 3 teams. Almost every single team, excluding a few really terrible dumpster teams, have a good player that is their star. And I think they could capitalize on that with stuff like this. If they do a great job, then let people know, hey, this is cool and this is something fun, and it's not anything to take super seriously. It's just fun. Like you guys said, I think they could get creative with it and do a belt or do a whatever. And it's just another fun thing that lets the players and the fans have something to enjoy. And why not do it?
Yep, I agree. And especially in a year whenever, game-winning home runs and these kind of celebrations are being encouraged by MLB, but they've also been hard to come by because we've seen this kind of be the year of the pitcher. A lot of things have happened. MLB came out and announced that they were going to deaden the ball. So we kind of anticipated that there would be less home runs this season, less, things to get excited about. But then we have 6 no-hitters in the first month and a half of the season.
Unreal.
Yeah, crazy.
I'm pretty sure that the modern day baseball record for no-nos in a season is only 7. And you have to go back to the 1800s to find a season that had 8 or more. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, and you mentioned that that MLB came out and said that they were going to deaden the ball, and I'm surprised we didn't really hear more about that, because there was all
we talked about it.
Right. There was all that speculation that a few years ago that the balls were juiced and that the balls were just flying out of the parks, and they've seemingly gone the complete opposite way for whatever reason. And I think that's apparent. I mean, 6 no-hitters, and we're not even in June yet.
Well, we had 6 no-hitters and then one that has a bit of an asterisk beside of it because Madison Bumgarner threw a 7-inning no-hitter that doesn't officially count.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think it's so bizarre I think in any situation, and this is a little bit philosophical, so bear with me for a moment, but when you have a problem, not just sports related, but a problem, to me, the solution is rarely ever to go complete 180, because then you're going to have the exact opposite problem, and then you got to find a middle ground. Maybe don't deaden the ball. Maybe find some other way to fix it. And I'm not here to try and say this is how you fix the offensive problem or the home run problem, but it just seems like so many times in sports we see these guys go 180 and you see other problems created too quickly out of it. And, it was like scientifically proven that these balls were juiced or they were flying further than they ever had before. Like that was proven, right? And whether the MLB did that on purpose or not, that's a different discussion. But I have no problem with the no-hitters. I think that, despite the fact that there have been 6 in a month and a half, they're all super exciting in their own way. I'm like I said, I'm more of a pitcher's guy, so I love the no-hitters, but I just think it's bizarre to think that, the one thing of a dead ball creates this whole other discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, it does though, man. Like Zach and I have had several conversations about the balls in Major League Baseball. We actually had one episode where I took a ball that was from was it the 2019 season? I think
something like that. Yeah.
A baseball from a 2019 season and a ball that I got at a game back in like the 90s. And we compared those 2 balls live on the podcast, and the viewers at that time could even see like the differences just on the outside surface of the baseball. The seams are much smaller now, so that makes the ball a lot more aerodynamic. There's less drag, less resistance. The ball itself is a little bit lighter. I don't know if it's the cork that they use inside or they use less yarn or whatever it is that they do. The ball itself is a little bit lighter. So it's interesting whenever you can get 2 official MLB balls from different eras and compare them to one another, because you can tell that there was a huge difference. I would love to get a ball from this season and compare it to the one that I had from 2019 and see what the difference is between those 2. Because that, I'm sure there's something different going on with these baseballs. And the fact that MLB came out and they said that they're going to deaden the balls that tells me definitively that they have the power to also juice the balls.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting and very suspicious that after the 6th no-hitter of this season, all of a sudden you saw a 20-1 game for the Atlanta Braves when they absolutely went off. And that same night, you had like 3 or 4 different teams blow out somebody else. So it's like all of a sudden, after the string of no-hitters, now you're getting blowouts. Maybe they're switching the balls around.
Yeah, very well.
Conspiracy theory.
Put on your tinfoil hat. Let's do this.
The thing to me about no-hitters is I think that they are exciting, but the special thing about a no-hitter is that it's supposed to be a rarity. You know, not every guy can get a no-hitter. And Brad is in our comments saying that Pedro never got a no-hitter rather. I think when they're a rarity, it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's really cool that a pitcher can go out there and do that well. But when there's 6 and it's not even June, it's a little questionable. And Lucas mentioned, how to fix the issue with offense. A lot of people are saying that pitchers have never been better, and everyone's throwing 95 plus, which is true. But I also think that most hitters are all going for the long ball. There are not very many contact guys. Mm-hmm. And that's how you fix it. You change the mentality of no matter what, I'm swinging for a home run to sure, I'll swing for a home run if I can, if the situation arises. But if I'm down 0-2 and we need to get on base so I can get the next guy his chance, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find a way on base. And that's how you generate offense. And that's how you prevent all these ridiculous no-hitters.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, to counterpoint a little bit, like a no-hitter is to me still super special, but it might be we shifting to maybe a no-hitter isn't super rare. Maybe not everybody, obviously a no-hitter is still impressive. 27 outs without giving up a hit is still impressive. It might not be as rare as it was before, but maybe now everybody chases that perfect game. Maybe the perfect game becomes what is super rare, because 6 times it's happened this year. Now, one of them has been perfect. The closest one was Carlos Rodon. So maybe that's where we're shifting. And a couple things that I love about a no-hitter is that, like you said, Brad mentioned that Pedro did. I'm assuming Pedro Martinez. That says something. That says how difficult it is when you have arguably one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, in baseball history, not have one, but you have Wade, maybe Miley do have a no-hitter. Yep. That's what makes them so crazy. To me, is that you have guys, they're almost inexplicable in a way, that you have these dominant pitchers that have no hitters, but then you have other ones that aren't necessarily the greatest career pitchers have them. That's what makes them so fascinating to me. And a lot of different scenarios, maybe you turn on a game that you wouldn't normally watch. The Tigers and Mariners, who's going to watch that game if you're not in Detroit or Seattle? Well, I'm going to turn that on if there's a no-hitter. There's been 4 this season. I don't care. I'm turning that thing on.
Yeah.
So I think it still brings excitement.
That's a very good point. Whenever I get the notification on the MLB app, I immediately open up that game just to see if it happens or not. I don't care who's playing. And like you said, if it was Detroit and whoever, I never would tune into that game if it weren't for the potential of a no-hitter. And it's crazy. I think I had a point, but I lost it. So, oh well, I'll just give the floor back.
Yeah, I think Brad's saying that it's not true that Kluber's was closer. I think what he's referring to on that one, Brad, is Rondon's no-hitter was broken up in the 8th inning, I believe it was, whenever he hit a batter on the foot, whereas Kluber's no-hitter was broken up technically, or perfect game was technically broken up in the 3rd inning whenever he walked a guy. So to that point, Rondon's was the closest to a perfect game.
Closest out-wise.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what he was saying. Like
exactly.
So
both impressive. Both
impressive to only have one guy reach runner. Base for the entire game. But yeah, it's I think he went the longest duration with a perfect. So
sure.
So what do you guys think? Are we going to see more no-hitters going forward? Are we going to see guys coming, more guys that you don't expect, like Wade Miley coming out there, Joe Musgrove throwing no-hitters? Are we going to see more guys that you don't expect? Or are these guys that are getting paid the big bucks, like your Trevor Bauers, like your Max Scherzers, are these guys going to come up and be like, okay, well, we can do this too. Just give us the 9 innings to do it?
Well, if your conspiracy theory is correct, we probably won't see any more no-hitters the entire year.
Yeah.
Garrett Richards, maybe.
That's a very good point. I mean, if MLB has the ability to change the composition or whatever of the ball on a game-to-game basis, we might not see one. Maybe they see that this is not the move that we all wanted. Maybe they're just going to juice them again. Who knows? Another thing that I wanted to pick your brain on, both of you guys, is there any coincidence that all of the no-hitters were against 3 teams, that being the what was it, the Rangers, the Tigers, and the
Rangers, Mariners, and Indians.
Mariners. There you go. That's kind of weird to me. So what are your thoughts on that?
They're all bad offensive teams. I think that's what it comes down to,
Right.
But it is bizarre. I'm not trying to take anything away from it or dismiss it. It's so bizarre, and I think that goes to what you were talking about earlier of the all or nothing approach. We're going to hit home runs. We're going to get out. I think the Mariners, and again, batting average is not an end all be all statistic, but the Mariners batting average after that no hitter was like collectively $190 for the season. And like I said, average doesn't mean today what it meant in the 1980s because you have so many other sabermetrics. But the Mariners, when you have that approach, when you have bad hitters, these no hitters are going to happen. And again, so many other things that go into that, whether it be the baseballs or the foreign substances that MLB is cracking down on, whatever it might be. But it's definitely bizarre.
Yeah.
So to kind of segue onto all that stuff, the Cleveland Indians right now are a game and a half out of first place. They have a -2 run differential. So their pitching keeps them in games, but to Lucas's point, they're the 28th best team, or I guess the 28th worst team in terms of batting average. That means the only 2 teams that are worse than them with batting average in the entire major leagues, the Milwaukee Brewers and, surprise, surprise, the Seattle Mariners, to round out the 30th. So that's 2 of those teams. The 15th place team in batting average is the Texas Rangers. So they're actually dead center average batting average wise. It's interesting that they have been no hit twice and they've got a club 235 batting average. So they're not that bad. They've just happened to have a couple of bad games. And I do think it's very interesting to note that the Texas Rangers and the Seattle Mariners both have been no-hit twice, are in the AL West. They're still better than the Los Angeles Angels.
Jeez.
That's a good point.
Who they have 2 potential MVPs on that team and are still terrible.
They had the Angels have a -50 run differential right now.
That's some bad pitching. It is some
That's
bad
terrible pitching. Yeah. They've scored 209 runs, which is second most in the AL West, but they've given up 259 runs, which is the most in the entire American League.
I think
Not
question,
good.
no, not good. I think a question that I always ask myself, and something fun to think about: what's a bigger disservice to the game of baseball? The fact that Mike Trout has played in 3 postseason games in his Hall of Fame legendary career and lost them all, or the embarrassingly amount of lack of run support for Jacob deGrom. I mean, these are 2 of the best athletes, the best baseball players on the planet, and they are both just getting absolutely screwed by their situations. Again, that's just something I like to think about, not to discuss, but something bizarre.
That is an anomaly, and that's part of what makes baseball so wonderful. Is you've got 2 guys that are on Hall of Fame trajectories that essentially get screwed by the rest of their teams.
Yep.
Baseball is wacky and it's lovely.
Yeah, that's why we all love it so much. That's kind of all that I have to talk about in baseball, I think, for right now. Actually, no, I've got one thing, but we'll get to that in just a moment after we clear the rest of these bases. But I do want to talk a little bit about NFL. And Lucas, if you want to chime in, you're more than welcome to, because here at the Nest Podcast, we also like to cover football. And like we were talking about before we came on, football is one of our passions, specifically fantasy football is one of our passions. And with all the rumors and all of the big circulations going on in football today, we may see some major implications come fantasy football season as well. Breaking news as of today, Julio Jones really wants out of the Atlanta Falcons organization. Of course, he went and told the organization back in March that he wanted a trade. He requested a trade. He wanted out. He wants to go somewhere else. Shannon Sharp called him today on Undisputed put him on speakerphone, and said, "Hey, are you going back to the Atlanta Falcons?" He goes, "Nah, man, I'm out of there." I don't know if Julio knew that he was on live TV at that time because Shannon Sharp didn't tell him he was on TV until after the fact. But he came out and he's like, "Nah, I'm out of there. I'm not going back there." So that tells me that something major is about to happen. And he also brushed off the fact that he isn't going to go play for the Dallas Cowboys. So any of you Cowboys fans that are out there listening, sorry, you're not going to end up with Julio. It's to me, it's pretty spectacular that he's also came out and said that he wants to play in New England with Cam Newton, which I'm okay with that. You know, Zach knows I've always been a huge Julio guy. I've always been a big fan of his work and everything that he's done on the football field. So I would love and embrace him coming to New England. I mean, that's a future Hall of Fame wide receiver. Why wouldn't you want him, right, Zach?
Yep, that's a very good point. It's a very interesting story. I think there was kind of at least rumor or speculation that he may or may not be traded just because he takes up so much cap space that they probably need to get rid of him, especially considering the amount of work that he doesn't do for that team because he can't beat the double coverage or whatever the excuse is. It'd be interesting to see what he can do in a new setting. And Brandon and I texted about it. If he does end up going to New England, what that might look like. The Patriots went and got themselves several good tight ends. He's a deep threat. Julio is a deep threat. If you're double covering Julio Jones, that leaves all those guys out in the center there wide open. Thus, if you cover hard on those tight ends, that leaves Julio wide open for a deep threat. It might work out for him. I don't know if maybe his issues were just the fact that he was playing for the Falcons or something else. But I think if he does get to play for another team, look for him to have a better season for sure. I don't think that the Falcons are a good team for anyone to be on, to be honest.
The fit with the New England Patriots is just too perfect. Like you alluded to, you know, they've got the tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, that are going to be monsters over the middle. Then they also picked up Aguilar, who can stretch the field. You put Julio on the opposite side of that, and you've got wide open. You've got a quarterback in Cam Newton that can run the ball. You've got a good running attack. You've got good line to block. This is a team that if you add Julio Jones to this team, they win the AFC East. They potentially win the AFC and go back to the Super Bowl. How much would the haters hate to see the Patriots back in the Super Bowl so soon? Oh, and by the way, they just drafted this kid named Mac Jones. He's going to be good too.
Yeah, crazy.
The big date to watch for all that is going to be June 1st because, Zach, you alluded to the cap space. Right now, Julio counts for $21 million on the Falcons cap if they keep him. If he's traded after June 1st, it only counts for $7 million on their cap for this coming season. So after June 1st is when we'll see movement on Julio. News dropped today that there are 3 notable NFL quarterbacks that did not report to their teams for OTAs, which is a voluntary workout, but it's still worth mentioning that these 3 particular quarterbacks haven't been happy with their teams all season. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Deshaun Watson did not report for their phase 3. Head coach of the Seahawks, Pete Carroll, said that the Russ and the Seahawks drama is, quote, really old news. But with him not showing up to OTAs, it seems like there might be something still there. Aaron Rodgers, videos are circulating of him on Twitter hanging out in Hawaii right now. So he's not even close to Green Bay. Football's not even on his mind. He's out there on vacation with his fiance, drinking pina coladas out of coconut shells, doing whatever it is that he does in Hawaii. He's not caring about what's going on in Green Bay. He's ready to leave. He's ready to get out and go somewhere else. And then the Watson issue is one that's been kind of quiet lately, but there are still 22 pending cases against him. And I did see that deliberation for that case. So unless he reaches some kind of settlement during the season, the deliberation for all this isn't until February 2022. So he'll at least get to play the entirety of the 2021 NFL season, whether it's for the Houston Texans or for a team that decides to take that gamble. Who knows? You got anything to add to that, Zach?
No, I'm pretty good. The Deshaun Watson issue is the strangest to me. Aaron Rodgers not showing up makes sense. Russell Wilson, it's kind of a shock, I guess, but they've had their woes. But Deshaun Watson is interesting because if I were him, the position he's in, I would want to do anything I could to earn a paycheck, because
Sure.
if he's looking at potential jail time or something here in the near future, he's going to miss the days when he was playing football. So I do not expect a team to trade for him at this point, seeing as how he probably won't be playing football next year. It's kind of surprising that he has the ability to play this year. I would imagine that the NFL would suspend him or something if he's got some allegations with some court dates or whatever coming up in the near future. It's kind of weird that they haven't come out and said something about that, considering the whole Me Too movement and all that stuff that is circulating just culture in general. So it's weird that he has the potential to play this year. I did not expect him to be able to do that.
Yeah, the NFL has not suspended him as of yet. So that will be one to watch going forward in this offseason. Phil Mickelson became the oldest player in golf history to win a major this week, and he won his 6th all-time at the age of 50. At 50, he actually qualifies to be on the senior PGA Tour. Do you think Phil should go off and ride into the sunset and dominate these old guys for a little while? Or should he stick around and try to win number 7 in the regular circuit?
Go ahead, Lucas.
I've always been a big Phil fan. I don't watch golf a ton, but when I do, I always love Phil. You know, if he thinks he can compete, I say stick with it. I think there's one Grand Slam he hasn't won, the U.S. Open. I think it's the one he hasn't won, if I remember correctly. So I say go out, maybe give one more shot at that, and if you don't win that, maybe then you're out to the sunset. But that was remarkable. I mean, that was awesome just to see that, watch it on TV. All the fans pretty much on the fairway as he was going up. I know Brooks Koepka had a problem with it, but no, I think if Phil is gonna dominate like that, I say why not stick with it? You're already exempt. You don't have to qualify. You're in these tournaments for the next 5 years. Go for it.
Yeah, for sure. What do you have to lose?
Yeah. One note on the quarterback thing. As a Bears fan, I'm happy that Rodgers might leave. I want him out of the NFC North. That's all I've got to add. I want Rodgers out of Green Bay. That's all I want.
There you go.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're a Bears fan, but a Cardinals fan.
Get that all the time.
Well, he lives in Illinois, so I guess that makes sense.
Okay, that checks out.
Illinois, you know, he's not close enough to appreciate the Cubs or the White Sox, who've been terrible anyway. So
you can't appreciate the Cubs. I mean, anybody who does is just wrong. So,
back to the NL Central. Former Brewers catcher Eric Katz was a guest on Curtain Call on the Yes Network recently, and he said a certain NL team that has been to the World Series a lot recently, Dodgers, potentially use some sign stealing scheme against the Brewers in the 2018 NLCS. So he basically threw them under the bus, saying, hey, they were doing the same thing that the Astros were doing. They just didn't get caught. They didn't get the spotlight shined on them at that moment. And he also specifically mentioned that the Rockies were doing the exact same thing as the Astros. So does this change your mind about the 2017 Astros World Series championship if other teams were also doing it, they just didn't get caught?
Two wrongs don't make a right. I think everybody doing that was in the wrong for me. And again, if MLB wants to regulate some kind of sign stealing thing or whatever, that's one route you can go. Not that I would say they should do that, but just because everybody's doing it, it doesn't make it right. So I still have a problem with it. You got to wonder about, if the Dodgers were making these comments about the Astros and how wrong that was, if they were still doing it, then you kind of wonder, wow, were we really too harsh on the Astros? But I still have a problem with all of it. I mean, I know sign stealing, old fashioned of if you run on second base, that's been going on for a long time. But just because we're advancing so far in technology that we can do this podcast from 3 different plates in the country doesn't mean we need to be using that technology to steal signs and to do things that are against the rules and cheating. So I still disagree with everything about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that certain things need to remain sacred, and with the ability of technology to do all this kind of crazy stuff, it cannot have any place in cheating or sign stealing or anything. I've basically moved on from the whole Astros thing. I think most baseball fans were up in flames about that when the news broke, but there's nothing we can do about it. And if it does turn out that more teams did it, well, then they get to be put in the same boat as the Astros. They cheated to get where they were. And if it's the Rockies, that wasn't anywhere. So whatever. But if it's the Dodgers, then we basically had two teams that were cheating to get to where they are, and who knows what they're doing at the moment. I don't know if the Dodgers are still having some kind of scheme or what, but it sucks to see, and it's the worst thing for the sport at the moment. I think baseball is having a harder time as it is gaining fans and catching the attention of everyone's short attention spans. And if it turns out that champions and people that are in World Series contention are cheating to get there, it's going to turn people off for sure. And it's not good. And I think it needs to be just completely eradicated. I don't know how you're going to do that, but that should be a number one priority for MLB, is to figure out how you can just 100% or at least close to it, get rid of all this potential for cheating.
Yeah.
Agreed. Ditto.
Yep, I agree. And with that being said, I thank everybody for listening, and I appreciate everybody tuning in and enjoying another episode of the Nest Podcast. Before we leave this week, though, in honor of Phil Mickelson's historic victory, I would like to share the hilarious Fireside with Phil. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of Fireside with Phil, where I share with you some stories that have taken place throughout my career that I think you might find interesting. My first story took place during the Memorial Tournament back in 2006 or so. Our second round was interrupted by weather and darkness, and we had to reconvene the next morning at around 7 in the morning. I'm on the sixth hole, and the tour official is cutting a new hole, but we haven't finished our round yet. We have to play to the same hole location. So I raise my hand and say, "Hey, we're not done." And the rules official raises his hand, acknowledges that he heard me, but continues to cut a new hole. So I walk further up and I say, "Hey, we're not done." And again, he puts his hand up to acknowledge he hears me, but continues to cut a new hole. So finally, I walk right up close to the edge green, just on the other side of a lake. And I said, "We're not done." He stands up in disgust and puts his hands on his hips and says, "Someone took a dump in the cup." Very well, then carry on.
That's awesome.
Thank you guys for watching the Nest Podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.